Dr. Elena Vasquez's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the invitation hologram for the third time that morning. The message, transmitted through the Galactic Council's official channels, had arrived 2 weeks ago with her morning coffee and a side of confusion. Advanced Biological Warfare Countermeasures Symposium, it read, followed by coordinates for Kepler Station and a formal request for her attendance as a distinguished xenobiologist. The irony wasn't lost on her. Elena had spent the last 5 years studying interspecies communication and biological compatibility, not warfare. Her research focused on how different species could coexist peacefully, sharing knowledge and resources across the galaxy. She'd published papers on Zephyrian crystal resonance patterns and mycelian spore communication networks. War was the antithesis of everything she believed in. But the invitation had come from the Galactic Council itself, stamped with official seals from a dozen different species. How could she refuse? As one of only 47 humans currently working in deep space, Elena felt a responsibility to represent her species at important interstellar gatherings. Earth's colonial expansion was still young, and maintaining good relations with established galactic powers was crucial for humanity's future. The journey to Kepler Station had taken 3 days aboard a Rigelian transport ship. Elena had spent the time reviewing her notes on defensive biological protocols, assuming she'd be discussing ways to protect various species from potential bioweapons. The translation matrix had been a bit garbled during transmission. Academic conferences often had awkward titles that didn't translate well between species. Now, standing before the grand auditorium's massive doors, Elena adjusted her universal translator one final time. The device, a gift from the Menthuri Embassy on Europa, was supposed to be top-of-the-line technology. Still, she'd learned to double-check its accuracy after a particularly embarrassing incident involving what she thought was a discussion about fertilizer but turned out to be a marriage proposal from a Vex High diplomat. The auditorium was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Constructed from living crystal that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, it could accommodate thousands of beings of vastly different physiologies. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, supported by organic pillars that seemed to grow from the floor itself. The architecture was clearly Zephyrian, beautiful, functional, and slightly unsettling to human sensibilities. As Elena entered, she was struck by the diversity of the assembled crowd. Tall, crystalline Zephyrians clinked softly as they moved to their seats, their bodies refracting the auditorium's light into rainbow patterns. The blob-like Netherians oozed into specially designed cushions that molded to their gelatinous forms. Insectoid Vex High clicked their mandibles in what Elena had learned was their equivalent of excited chatter. She spotted several species she'd never encountered before, beings with too many limbs, others that seemed to exist partially in different dimensions, and a few that defied easy categorization. Elena found a seat in the third row, her human form dwarfed by the variety of alien physiology around her. She pulled out her tablet, fingers dancing across the holographic interface as she prepared to take notes. The familiar weight of the device was comforting in the sea of otherworldly beings. As one of the few humans working in deep space, she felt it was her duty to stay informed about threats to her species and to document any new defensive strategies she might learn. The conversations around her were a symphony of clicks, whistles, harmonic resonances, and chemical signals that her translator worked overtime to process. She caught fragments of discussion about biological vulnerabilities and species-specific targeting, which reinforced her assumption that this was indeed a defensive symposium. Perhaps other species were concerned about the same bioweapon threats that kept Earth's security forces awake at night. The lights dimmed gradually and a hush fell over the massive gathering. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as the atmosphere shifted from academic excitement to something more ominous. The bioluminescent walls pulsed in rhythm with what she realized was a ceremonial pattern, not celebratory but almost funeral-like. A massive Crytherian stepped up to the central podium, his 4 arms moving with military precision. Elena recognized General Thaxmore from the diplomatic files she'd studied during her journey. He was a high-ranking official in the Galactic Council's defense forces, known for his strategic brilliance and unwavering loyalty to Council interests. His presence here suggested the symposium was more important than she'd initially realized. General Thaxmore's voice boomed through the translation system, each word carefully enunciated and carrying an undertone that made Elena's skin crawl with instinctive unease. "Welcome, fellow beings of the Galactic Council," he began, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled crowd with what Elena could only describe as predatory satisfaction. "Today, we gather to discuss the final solution to the human problem." Elena's blood ran cold. Her translator had to be malfunctioning. The words couldn't mean what she thought they meant. Could they? Elena's hands began to shake as the full weight of General Thaxmore's words settled over her. The universal translator couldn't be malfunctioning. The clarity of his subsequent statements removed any doubt about his intentions. "As you all know," the general continued, his 4 arms gesturing toward a massive holographic display that materialized above the podium, "the humans have become an increasing threat to galactic stability. Their unpredictable nature, their tendency toward violence, and their alarming rate of technological advancement make them unsuitable for coexistence with civilized species." Elena gripped her tablet so tightly her knuckles turned white. The stylus trembled in her other hand as she fought to maintain her composure. Around her, various alien species nodded in agreement with disturbing enthusiasm. The Zephyrian seated to her left made a sound like wind chimes, a harmonic resonance she'd learned was their expression of approval. The sound, usually beautiful to human ears, now seemed sinister and cold. Behind her, she could hear the wet, satisfied gurgling of a Netherian delegate. The slug-like being's translator rendered its pleasure as, finally, someone addresses the elephant in the room. "The humans have been a destabilizing force since their arrival in galactic politics." Elena's mind raced. How long had this been planned? How had humanity completely missed the signs of such widespread hostility? Her research had focused on cooperation and mutual understanding. Had she been naive to assume other species shared those values? Today's seminar will cover the most effective methods for human elimination based on extensive research into their biological and psychological weaknesses. General Thaxmore activated the holographic display and Elena's breath caught in her throat. The hologram showed a detailed anatomical diagram of a human body. Not just any human, but a perfect representation down to the cellular level. Every organ, every major blood vessel, every nerve cluster was mapped with surgical precision. Elena recognized the accuracy immediately. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. Someone had conducted extensive, invasive studies on human physiology. Where did they get this data? She whispered to herself, then immediately regretted speaking aloud. Fortunately, the ambient noise of the auditorium masked her voice. "First, let's discuss their physical vulnerabilities," announced Dr. Yilseth, a snake-like ophidian who slithered to a secondary podium with fluid grace. Her scales shimmered with an oily iridescence, and when she spoke, her forked tongue flicked out to taste the air. "Humans require a very specific atmospheric composition, 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, with trace amounts of argon and carbon dioxide. A simple adjustment to their life support systems could eliminate entire colonies without the need for direct confrontation." Elena forced herself to continue taking notes, her stylus moving across the tablet's surface with mechanical precision. She had to document this threat, had to get this information back to Earth somehow. But how? She was trapped in an auditorium full of beings actively planning genocide against her species. "Their cardiovascular system is particularly fragile," Dr. Yilseth continued, her voice carrying the clinical detachment of a medical professional. "A single puncture to the carotid artery, the femoral artery, or the subclavian will cause rapid exsanguination. They lack the redundant circulatory systems that we Ophidians possess, making them vulnerable to what would be minor injuries for most galactic species." The presentation continued with horrifying thoroughness. The Ophidian detailed human nutritional requirements, explaining how easily their food supply could be contaminated with substances toxic to human biology but harmless to other species. She discussed sleep patterns, showing how sleep deprivation could be weaponized to break down human psychological defenses. Elena realized with growing horror that this wasn't theoretical research, this was an active planning session for genocide. The level of detail, the specific targeting strategies, the calm, professional manner in which her species was being dissected like a laboratory specimen, it all pointed to years of careful preparation. As the hour-long presentation concluded, Elena found herself fighting back tears of rage and terror. How many humans had died to provide this information? How many colonies had already been tested without Earth's knowledge? The applause that followed Dr. Yilseth's presentation was the most terrifying sound Elena had ever heard. The third speaker was a Menthri, a species Elena had encountered only once before during her diplomatic training on Europa. Elder Quintel's bulbous head, easily 3 times the size of a human skull, pulsed with intricate bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like living art. The being's spindly arms moved in hypnotic gestures as it approached the podium with an almost floating gait. Physical elimination, while effective, is crude and wasteful. Quintel's voice didn't come through the translator. Instead, it whispered directly into Elena's mind with the sensation of ice water trickling down her spine. The human psyche is a delicate instrument, far more complex than their primitive technology might suggest, and infinitely more exploitable. Elena shuddered at the unwanted mental intrusion. The Menthry's telepathy felt like having a stranger rummaging through her thoughts, leaving cold fingerprints on her memories. She tried to build mental barriers, remembering the defensive techniques she'd learned during her xenopsychology courses, but Quintel's influence was overwhelming. We have conducted extensive psychological profiling over the past 7 years, the Menthry continued, its mental voice taking on an almost academic tone that made Elena's skin crawl. Humans are pack animals with extraordinarily strong social bonds. Unlike most galactic species who maintain emotional distance for survival, humans invest completely in their relationships. This emotional vulnerability can be weaponized with devastating effectiveness. The holographic display shifted to show brain scans, human brain scans. Elena recognized the neural patterns from her own studies, but these were labeled with clinical precision: stress response patterns, emotional breakdown thresholds, psychological trauma indicators. The data was extensive, suggesting years of invasive study. How did you obtain this neurological data? Elena whispered under her breath, already dreading the answer. As if responding to her unspoken question, Quintel's mental voice grew more satisfied. We have conducted carefully controlled experiments on isolated human subjects. The Proxima Centauri research station provided excellent test cases, families separated from their support networks, exposed to graduated psychological pressure. Elena's blood turned to ice. Her cousin Michael lived on Proxima Centauri with his wife and 2 young children. The last communication she'd received from him mentioned unusual stress among the colonists, but the message had been vague, almost confused. Now she understood why. The human capacity for hope is simultaneously their greatest strength and their most exploitable weakness, Quintel continued, its head patterns shifting to what Elena recognized as predatory satisfaction. They will endure tremendous hardship if they believe rescue or relief is possible. However, when that hope is systematically destroyed, when they watch their loved ones suffer while being powerless to help, their psychological defenses collapse entirely. The presentation continued with horrifying detail. Elena watched data streams showing human suicide rates, depression statistics, and behavioral modification patterns. The Menthry had mapped human emotional responses with the same precision that Dr. Yilseth had mapped human anatomy. Isolation protocols are particularly effective, Quintel explained, its mental voice taking on an almost euphoric quality. Humans require social interaction to maintain psychological stability. Separate them from their communities, convince them they've been abandoned by their own species, and they will often eliminate themselves rather than face prolonged solitude. Elena bit her tongue hard enough to taste blood, fighting to keep from crying out. The clinical detachment with which her species was being dissected, not just physically but emotionally and psychologically, was beyond anything she'd imagined possible. We have also discovered that humans possess an unusual trait called survivor's guilt, the Menthry continued. They suffer psychological damage when they survive situations where others perish. This can be exploited by ensuring that human survivors witness the deaths of their companions, creating long-term psychological trauma that requires no additional resources to maintain. The holographic display showed video footage, actual recordings of human subjects under psychological stress. Elena recognized the uniforms. These were colonists from Outer Rim settlements, people who had trusted the Galactic Council's promises of protection and cooperation. The beauty of psychological warfare, Quintel's mental voice reached a crescendo of satisfaction, is that humans will do most of the work for us. We simply need to provide the right environmental pressures, the correct sequence of traumas, and they will destroy themselves. No weapons required, no direct confrontation, no risk to Council forces. Elena gripped her tablet so tightly she heard the casing crack. Around her, the alien audience murmured their approval through various species-specific expressions of satisfaction. The sound was like a death knell for her entire species. Estimated timeline for complete psychological breakdown of human resistance, Quintel concluded, is between 18 to 24 months following implementation of coordinated psychological pressure campaigns. The applause that followed was telepathic. A wave of mental satisfaction that crashed over Elena like a tsunami of malevolent joy. A HFY technician emerged from the audience with quick, jerky movements that reminded Elena of a predatory spider. Its chitinous exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian under the auditorium's bioluminescent lighting, and the complex array of mechanical augmentations grafted to its carapace marked it as a member of the engineer caste. Elena had worked with HFY before during her research on artificial neural networks, and she'd always found their technological prowess impressive. But she'd never seen one with such predatory body language, the way its compound eyes tracked movement, the aggressive positioning of its razor-sharp limbs. "I am Chief Engineer Kale Kadar of the HFY Technological Collective," the insectoid being announced, its mandibles clicking in rapid staccato patterns that the translator rendered as excitement. "I will present the technological solutions for human elimination. Solutions that will demonstrate the superiority of council engineering over primitive human systems." Elena's xenobiology training had taught her to read HFY body language. The elevated position of Kale Kadar's head, the aggressive spreading of its wing casings, and the rapid antenna movements all indicated predatory satisfaction. This wasn't just professional presentation, this was personal pride in designing tools of genocide. The holographic display shifted dramatically, now showing three-dimensional star charts of human space. Elena recognized every system: Sol, Centauri, Wolf 359, Barnard's Star. All of humanity's painstakingly established colonies appeared as glowing dots connected by quantum communication lines. But overlaying the familiar map were ominous red markers and targeting vectors that made her stomach clench with dread. "Human technology is primitive but adaptable," Kale Kadar continued, its voice taking on the lecturing tone of a professor explaining a particularly simple concept to slow students. "However, their rapid advancement has created critical dependencies that we can exploit. They have centralized their entire civilization around quantum communication networks and artificial intelligence systems." Elena watched in growing horror as the presentation detailed strike points across human space. Luna Base, where her former professor Dr. Martinez conducted atmospheric research. Mars Colony, home to her best friend from university. The Jupiter mining stations, where her grandfather had worked before retirement. The Europa Research Facility, where she'd completed her doctoral dissertation. All of humanity's major installations were marked for systematic destruction. The humans' greatest weakness, Kale Kadar's voice buzzed with increasing excitement, is their absolute dependence on technology for survival. Remove their computers, their communication networks, their life support systems, and they become helpless insects trapped in the vacuum of space. The engineer's presentation grew more detailed and more disturbing. Elena documented every horrifying innovation. Computer viruses specifically designed to target human operating systems, exploiting security vulnerabilities that had been secretly cataloged for years. Nanobots that could be introduced into human technology through routine supply shipments, designed to lie dormant for months before activating to corrupt critical systems. "The Cascade Failure Protocol is particularly elegant," Kale Kadar explained, its compound eyes gleaming with what Elena could only describe as technological sadism. "We introduce corrupted code into the human AI networks, code that appears beneficial initially but gradually turns their own machines against them. Their medical computers will misdiagnose illnesses. Their navigation systems will lead ships into stellar hazards. Their life support systems will slowly reduce oxygen levels while reporting normal function." Elena's hands shook as she took notes. The level of preparation was staggering. These weren't theoretical vulnerabilities, these were carefully planned attacks based on intimate knowledge of human technology. The timeline for complete technological disruption is approximately 72 standard hours, Kale Kadar concluded with obvious satisfaction. After that period, human resistance will collapse entirely, and physical elimination can proceed without significant risk to council forces. Elena felt sick. Every human colony, every station, every ship, all of it would be systematically sabotaged from within. Her species wouldn't even know they were under attack until it was too late. Dr. Mordish approached the podium like a living nightmare. The mycelium's fungal form expanded and contracted with each movement, its body a writhing mass of interconnected spores and mycorrhizal networks that glittered with an oily, rainbow sheen under the auditorium's lights. Elena had read about mycelians in her xenobiology texts but had never encountered one in person. Now she understood why most species found them deeply unsettling. Dr. Mordish appeared to be constantly decomposing and regenerating simultaneously, a living embodiment of decay and renewal. Biological warfare offers the most elegant solution to the human problem. Dr. Mordish's voice emerged not from any visible mouth but from chemical signals that permeated the air around it. The universal translator struggled with the complex pheromone patterns, rendering the communication as words that seemed to echo from multiple directions at once. Unlike the crude methods we have discussed, biological agents require minimal resources while providing maximum efficiency. Elena's hands began to shake uncontrollably as she took notes. This was moving beyond strategic planning into the realm of her worst nightmares. As a xenobiologist, she understood the devastating potential of engineered pathogens better than most humans. Humans possess remarkably weak immune systems compared to most galactic species, Dr. Mordish continued, releasing a cloud of sparkling spores that formed holographic displays in the air. Elena instinctively held her breath despite knowing the spores were likely harmless for now. Their evolutionary history on a single world, isolated from galactic pathogens, has left them vulnerable to organisms that pose no threat to council species. The holographic displays showed infection models that made Elena's blood run cold. Transmission vectors, incubation periods, mortality rates. All calculated with the precision of a master craftsman designing the perfect tool. The projected death rates approached 100% across all human age groups. We have identified several promising vectors for pathogen delivery, the mycelian explained, its form pulsing with what Elena recognized as excitement. Respiratory transmission is most efficient as humans require constant atmospheric exchange and cannot survive in sealed environments for extended periods. Their gregarious nature ensures rapid spread through populations. Elena watched in horror as the display showed a modified influenza virus, something that looked familiar yet terrifyingly alien. The genetic structure had been enhanced with components she didn't recognize, creating a chimera organism that retained the transmissibility of human flu while incorporating lethal elements from other worlds. The pathogen has been designed with exquisite specificity, Dr. Mordish continued, its chemical voice taking on an almost artistic pride. It targets genetic markers unique to human DNA, the sequences that distinguish Homo sapiens from other Earth species and, more importantly, from all council species. The weapon will be completely harmless to Terran animals and plant life, preserving the planet's resources for our use. Elena's stylus snapped in her grip. The casual mention of preserving Earth for our use revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just genocide, it was calculated species replacement designed to acquire human worlds intact while eliminating their inhabitants. Field testing has exceeded our most optimistic projections, Dr. Mordish announced, its spore crown flaring with satisfaction. Test subjects from the Human Research Facility at Proxima Centauri provided excellent data. The pathogen achieved 97% mortality within 14 days of initial exposure. Elena's heart stopped. Michael, his wife Anna, their children, Sophia and David. The unusual stress he'd mentioned in his last message suddenly took on a horrifying new meaning. Her family hadn't been experiencing psychological pressure, they'd been dying from an engineered plague designed specifically to kill humans. The production facility is already operational, Dr. Mordish continued, oblivious to Elena's silent anguish. Located in the Rigel system, the laboratory can produce sufficient quantities of the pathogen to infect every human world simultaneously. Delivery systems have been tested and refined, atmospheric processors, water supplies, even personal consumer goods can serve as vectors. The holographic display shifted to show timeline projections that painted humanity's future in stark, clinical terms. Estimated time to complete species elimination. 18 months following coordinated deployment. The pathogen will be introduced simultaneously across all human colonies, ensuring no population escapes exposure. Elena bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, fighting to maintain her composure. The methodical nature of the planning, the years of preparation, the cold calculation involved in designing the perfect genocide, it was beyond anything she'd imagined possible from supposedly civilized species. Dr. Mordish's presentation concluded with a demonstration of the pathogen's effects on human tissue samples. Elena forced herself to watch, to document, to remember every horrifying detail. Somewhere in the clinical data and mortality projections was her cousin's family, reduced to statistics in an alien's research notes. As the biological warfare presentation concluded to enthusiastic approval from the audience, Elena began to comprehend the true magnitude of the conspiracy surrounding her. This wasn't merely a collection of individual species harboring anti-human sentiment. This was a coordinated effort spanning multiple star systems involving the highest levels of galactic government and representing years of meticulous planning. Admiral Zefkol rose from the front row with a sound like crystal bells caught in a windstorm. The Zephyrian's towering form seemed to resonate with harmonic frequencies that made the air itself vibrate, and Elena could feel the vibrations in her bones. She had met Admiral Zefkol once before, during a diplomatic reception on Europa, where the being had seemed cordial, even friendly toward human representatives. Now, seeing the predatory satisfaction in the Admiral's crystalline features, Elena realized how completely she had misjudged the situation. The success of Operation Final Peace depends entirely on perfect coordination between all participating species, Admiral Zefkol announced, their voice creating haunting harmonics that the translator rendered with an almost musical quality. Each member of this coalition has been carefully selected based on their unique capabilities and their commitment to galactic stability. Elena watched in growing horror as the holographic display transformed into a massive organizational chart. Lines of communication, command structures, resource allocation networks. It was a military operation of unprecedented scope. She counted at least 15 different species actively participating, with dozens more providing material support. The Vexhai Technological Collective will handle all cybernetic warfare and infrastructure sabotage, Admiral Zefkol continued, gesturing toward Chief Engineer K.L. Kadar, who raised his razor-sharp limbs in acknowledgement. Their expertise with artificial intelligence systems makes them uniquely qualified to turn human technology against its creators. Elena's hands trembled as she documented the division of responsibilities. Each species had been assigned tasks that played to their particular strengths, creating a multi-pronged assault that would overwhelm any possible human defense. The Mycelian Bioengineering Consortium will coordinate all biological warfare initiatives, the Admiral continued. Dr. Mordish's laboratory complex in the Rigel system has been operational for the past 3 years, with full council funding and protection. 3 years. Elena's mind reeled at the implications. While humanity had been celebrating successful diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, their supposed allies had been developing weapons of mass extinction specifically designed to eliminate every man, woman, and child in human space. The Menthri Consciousness Collective will implement psychological warfare protocols across all human populations. Admiral Zefkol's harmonics took on an almost celebratory tone. Their telepathic abilities allow them to monitor human communications and manipulate human decision-makers without detection. Elena suddenly understood why so many recent diplomatic negotiations had gone badly for humanity. How many human ambassadors had been unknowingly influenced by Menthri telepaths? How many critical decisions had been subtly manipulated to weaken human defenses? The Ophidian Medical Corps will oversee the deployment of targeted toxins and ensure that no human populations develop resistance to our biological agents. Admiral Zefkol's form pulsed with satisfaction. Their intimate knowledge of human physiology, gained through years of supposedly humanitarian medical exchanges, has proven invaluable. Elena thought of all the Ophidian doctors who had worked in human hospitals, all the medical data that had been shared in the spirit of interspecies cooperation. It had all been intelligence gathering for genocide. The Criterion Defense Force will provide military oversight and handle final elimination phases in any sectors where other methods prove insufficient. The Admiral's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. General Thaxmore's strategic brilliance has been instrumental in developing our comprehensive timeline. The holographic display shifted to show the operational timeline, a countdown to humanity's extinction. Elena saw dates and deadlines, resource allocation schedules, and coordination protocols. Operation Final Peace would begin in exactly 30 standard days, with simultaneous attacks across all human territories. Each participating species has been assigned specific sectors of human space, Admiral Zefkol explained. The Terran system itself will be handled by a joint task force to ensure complete elimination of the human homeworld. Elena's heart pounded as she realized she was looking at the most comprehensive genocide plan in galactic history. Every human colony, every space station, every ship, all of it had been cataloged, analyzed, and marked for destruction. Elena's heart hammered as the Menthri's mental probe pressed against her consciousness. She had seconds before her identity would be discovered. Drawing on her xenobiology training, Elena recalled her research on menthry telepathy. They were powerful, but their abilities were based on recognizing familiar neural patterns. Human brains were structured differently, perhaps different enough to cause confusion. Instead of trying to block the probe, Elena opened her mind completely, flooding it with every human memory, emotion, and thought pattern she could summon. The chaotic rush of human consciousness, love, fear, hope, despair, creativity, destruction. All of it poured into the menthry's telepathic senses. The alien recoiled with a mental scream. What? What are you? Elena stood up calmly, her mind now focused with crystal clarity. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, she announced to the suddenly silent auditorium. Xenobiologist, 3rd class, Human Colonial Research Division. And I've been taking very detailed notes. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Aliens leaped to their feet, weapons appeared, and security forces began moving toward her position. You might want to reconsider your timeline, Elena continued, her voice carrying clearly through the commotion. Because now I know exactly what you're planning, and I'm going to make sure my species knows too. General Thaxmore's 4 arms gestured frantically. Seize her. She cannot be allowed to leave. Elena smiled grimly. Too late. She held up her tablet, showing a transmission in progress. Everything you've said has been recorded and transmitted to the Human Colonial Authority. Your final piece just became an open war. The Criterion General's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Impossible. We've been monitoring all human communications. No signals have left this station. You've been monitoring human quantum communications, Elena corrected. But you forgot I'm a xenobiologist. I know how to communicate with other species. She pointed to the ventilation grate above her seat where a small, crystalline creature clung to the metal. That's a Kepler station message crystal. They're considered pests by most species, but they're actually quite intelligent. This one has been recording everything and transmitting it to its hive mind network. A network that includes message crystals on every human colony ship currently in deep space. The truth hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. Elena had turned their own xenobiology against them. Your genocide plan is now known to every human in the galaxy, Elena announced. And trust me, we don't go quietly into the night. You want a war? You've got one. As security forces closed in, Elena triggered the emergency beacon on her tablet. The message was simple but devastating. Priority Alpha transmission to all human colonies, genocide confirmed. Prepare for total war. Humanity will survive. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist, Kepler Station. She faced the approaching aliens with a fierce smile. You studied us for years, planned every detail, accounted for every weakness. But you made one critical error. What error? General Thaxmore demanded. You assumed that because we're individually weak, we're collectively helpless. You forgot that humans are pack animals. And when you threaten the pack, Elena's eyes blazed with determination. The pack fights back. The last thing Elena saw before the stun weapons fired was the expression of dawning horror on the aliens' faces as they realized they hadn't planned for genocide, they'd planned for the greatest unification of humanity in history. The war for human survival was about to begin. And thanks to one xenobiologist in Row 3, humanity would be ready.